All right, welcome to the Lovecraft e-zine videocast and podcast. Today is June the 12th, yeah, 2016. And our guest today is author James A. Moore. Hey, Jim, thanks for being on the show.
Thanks for having me.
And for the podcast listeners, we always do a quick intro of the rest of our panel. So I'm Mike Davis, Lovecraft e-zine, and let's start with Kelly.
I'm Kelly Young. I'm the executive editor of Strange Eons magazine.
Yeah, Matt.
I'm Matt Carpenter. I help do story selection at Ulthar Press. We're getting ready to open up a new book for submission, so more news later.
That's good to know. Maybe you can give the details in the second hour. That'd be great.
Yeah, as a writer, I would be interested in that, actually.
It doesn't pay, but the glory, man.
The glory is incredible.
Exposure. You get paid in exposure bucks.
I just...
Oh, my God.
Yeah, let's not go there. But, you know, the fact that you've been able to work with Matt Carpenter, I don't know if you can set a price on that, really.
Hey, Matt, do other presses that pay in exposure accept exposure bucks?
Don't be mad.
I think I have a new economy here.
And that guy speaking is Pete Rawlik. Why don't you introduce yourself, Pete?
I'm Pete Rawlik, author of Reanimators, The Weird Company, and the forthcoming Reanimatrix.
And Rick.
I'm Rick Lay. I've written chronological studies of Doc Savage in the Shadow and Jules the Grand and another Pulp Heroes.
And you're going to tell us what you think of the upcoming Doc Savage movie in the second hour.
Oh.
We can discuss that if you want.
Yeah, good point. All right, well, you know, several years ago, in fact, several years before I even started Lovecraft e-zine back in February of 2011, actually towards the end of 2010, well, I was in I believe it was a Barnes & Noble in Iowa, and I saw this book that I'm holding up on the screen. It's called Deeper by James A. Moore, and I've got the... Yeah, let me put Matt on the screen because he's got the really cool edition. Check that out.
2007 one. It is from Necessary Evil Press, the original issue, limited edition hardcover. The reason that we love this issue is check out the author photo on the back. There's never been a better author photo for a book.
No. No, that's right.
I've cut a little hair off since then.
Why don't you tell us about that motorcycle?
That motorcycle was, my brother was doing a photo shoot for Hot Bike magazine and said, you need to come down here and get some shots taken. That motorcycle is a $110,000 grade 2 titanium body motorcycle. Wow. Where he crafts the entire thing out of grade 2 titanium, including a die cast of a skeleton he purchased out of a medical supply company. And as I've said to people before, if you were driving down the road on that thing and you wiped out, the road would be torn up, you would be torn up, and that bike would be fine except for some cosmetics.
And that's what's important.
Do I own that bike? No, I do not. Would I like to own that bike? Oh, yes.
Yeah, I was going to say when you said what that was worth before we came on the air, I thought, man, he is making a lot of money as a writer.
I freaking wish. I've said this before. I'd like to thank Hollywood for everybody having the impression that you can write a novel and then spend 10 years with writer's block, living in a house by the lake somewhere.
Right.
Right.
I'm still waiting for that to happen on my agenda. If I could just make enough money to 10 years with a writer block and lakeside property, I'd be ecstatic.
Well, I would not mind being the protagonist in this book because he's got the oceanfront property, or he lives by the ocean. He's got 3 boats.
That's true.
Of course, he works pretty hard for him. But you know, I bought this book before I knew who a James A. Moore was, and before I really knew who anyone was, because of the first paragraph. My grandfather used to tell me that the oceans knew all the secrets the world had to offer. He said the biggest problem was that no one ever seemed to know how to listen for those secrets. So I thought, yeah, I'm just put this to the side because I'm buying it. And so, yeah, I really love the book, Jim.
Thank you very much. That was my first ever attempt at a novel-length first-person novel.
Nice.
or story. I mean, mostly before that it had been maybe 8,000 words in first person.
Hmm.
I remember talking to the author Tom Piccirilli, who may he rest in peace, and telling him that when I was done writing that it was the shortest novel I'd ever done at around 85,000 words. And there was a long pause on the phone. He said, "Jim, that's 15,000 words longer than my longest novel."
Yeah.
Well, I'm going to let Pete take over for a bit, but let me just get started by saying that you were telling me on the phone, or pardon me, when we did the video test the other day, that you have several other stories that are tied into this same
Oh, absolutely.
world, same characters. Can you start talking about that, and then Pete, you just
Yeah.
take over?
Well, the very first piece I did was a story called A Place Where There Is Peace. And I wrote that primarily because I absolutely love Shadow over Innsmouth. And at the end of Shadow over Innsmouth, in the original story, the town's been destroyed and the Deep Ones have been bombed, and nothing else ever happened about it, so I decided I would write a sequel. And in my sequel, somebody is rebuilding that old New England town as a new place called Golden Cove. Much hilarity ensues when the Deep Ones show up. Then I wrote the novel Deeper. I also wrote a sequel called The Sea Witch, which takes place in the same town later on, and that's just a short story. Charles R. Rutledge and I are working on a piece right now, a novella that's going to be called Black Tides, which will also tie directly into the novel.
Where is the Sea Witch available?
Yeah.
The Sea Witch is available right here in this handy book, Innsmouth Nightmares, by Lois H. Bridge.
Okay. And the prequel?
The prequel is available. Was available in my limited edition book called Slices, all of my short stories together, but I'm planning on having that out in some format soon where people can get it. And lastly, I'm working on a sequel to it right now, off and on when I can, called From a Lower Deep.
Okay.
Which will expand substantially on what happened in Deeper.
All right. So the genesis of this is really your love of the Shadow over Innsmouth.
Oh yes, absolutely. It's one of my favorite stories ever written.
Because there's a decidedly un-Lovecraftian element that comes in this book. I'm sorry, this is spoilers, but
go ahead and throw it.
The Ghost Cavalry,
Kind of minor spoilers, really.
I don't really look at that as completely un-Lovecraftian.
Okay.
Okay. He certainly had his share of stories along the lines of a ghost story. I just thought it'd be interesting to put a twist on there. And the twist in this case was that the victims of the Deep Ones from the past were still haunting the area. And not all of the ships that are there are victims of the Deep Ones. Some of them are just there. I love ghost ships.
Yeah. Well, that's good enough. What was the impetus for changing the name? I know down here in Florida, whenever some area gets renovated, they change the name for marketing purposes.
Well, that was a big part of it. If you read the original story, even at the beginning of Shadow over Innsmouth, Innsmouth had a bad reputation.
Right.
Well, if you're going to do a land investment, you're certainly not going to leave a bad reputation intact. So they changed the name to Golden Cove. And the idea was to make it as much of a New England tourist trap as they could.
Okay. There is the pacing and some of the scenes, the way they've been written, are very, in my mind at least, very role-playing game. And I know that you've written for White Wolf.
For years, yeah.
For years. So one, what does the process of writing for games help you figure out how to pace a novel? Was there any influence there? And two, what was that experience like writing and world building for White Wolf?
Well, that was a very different experience. My first writing gig was doing a couple of comic books for Marvel, and then all of the editors that I knew at Marvel basically got fired at the same time. thus ending my comic book career very quickly. After that, I started doing the role-playing stuff for White Wolf, and really one of the most interesting aspects about that is that you don't have a linear story. What you have is, this is what should happen, this is how it should happen, and these are all the variables that you should consider before you make any decisions while you're doing this. You're not writing a linear novel, you're writing a bunch of scenarios that are tied together. And you're trying to cover every possible scenario that people will come up with. And trust me, people will come up with new and exciting ways to throw your stories. So it's a good exercise in learning how to write a novel. But in the actual process of writing a novel, it didn't help me at all. It had nothing to do with the pacing of the story. I just felt the pacing on this one should be kind of meandering for a lot of it, because you're building up backgrounds and suspense rather than having any action.
Yeah,
Does that make sense?
That's a good question. That's a good answer.
Yeah, atmosphere is one of my favorite things about this book.
I didn't want to have a non-stop shootout. What I wanted to have was exactly that, a lot of atmosphere first. I wanted to build a sense of dread, the same way that Lovecraft built a sense of dread. And that's something that's missing out of a lot of novels these days, I think.
Matt, I know this is one of your favorite books. So do you want to jump in here and say something?
No, I'm actually more interested. This book, I've had the history of this book since 2007. It's a long time ago since I read it. It's like almost 10 years. I'm more interested in the new stuff, to be honest.
All right. Well, before we let him ramble on about the new stuff, I want to talk about.
I think Rick's got a question.
All right, Rick.
Well, I just want to make a comment on the ghost angle. You know, that angle has been in the mythos. It got introduced by Robert E. Howard in the Shadow Kingdom, where victims of the Serpent Men of Valusia are somehow bound to Earth. So it's not that foreign.
Okay.
I don't know that I've ever read that story, so it's cool to know.
How much do you want to go into the ghost stuff? It's like, I just didn't think Obed March was a nice guy. He brought the Deep One's attention to Innsmouth. So now say he's going to be a protective element. Oh well.
Rick, your mic's doing weird things, so when you're not talking, I'm going to hit your mute button, if that's all right. Thanks. Go ahead, Pete. Sorry about that.
That's okay. That's okay. So in addition to Deeper, the other 3 books that sit on my shelf in my Lovecraftian collection by you are Possessions.
Yep.
And Rabid Growth.
Yep.
These have sat on my shelves for, God, is it 10 years?
It's been a while since I wrote those.
And then, prepping for this interview, I was going through it, and I discovered a 3rd book in that series, Newbies, which, you know, these 2 came from Leisure. Now, we won't talk about Leisure.
Why not?
But this one, this one comes from a publisher called Smooch.
You know
Yeah, I couldn't believe that.
And the funny thing is that it's really, really good.
Thank you.
I picked this up and I could not put it down.
Smooch is actually, or was very briefly, Leisure's attempt at the young adult line.
But the reason
I would write something for it, and I had plenty of ideas to deal with both Chris Corrin and his sister Brittany, and I said, sure. And I did one book for them, and I was supposed to do another one for them, and Smooch died that quickly.
Wow.
Seriously.
These are, in my opinion, secretly Lovecraftian.
Absolutely.
These are stories about kids who never bother to go to the library and do their research.
Exactly.
Yeah. They're the worst mythos investigators in the world. They fight the monsters, they win, but they have no background whatsoever.
None.
And it's kind of fun to sit there and go like, oh my God, that's a Shoggoth. You know? And you're waiting for it, and it's like they never bother to say the words. And,
nope.
You know,
I wanted to have fun with the idea of what would happen with people who were actually blatantly ignorant about the entire thing.
There you go. And so, you know, and the other thing I like about this is that pretty much it starts off with the death of their mother, which I think is a really nice way to eliminate a sort of adult perspective in the book. Because there are events and positions that they take that no adult would ever allow to happen.
Oh yeah.
It makes perfect sense if you're a teenager who just won the lottery.
Well, that was half of the fun I had, was leaving up in the air whether or not his winning the lottery and his mother dying at the same time were coincidences or not.
Right. And leaving the necklace behind at the same, it was the third factor there.
Exactly. There is
but-
more background on all of that that, ironically enough, showed up in an entirely unrelated book called Vendetta.
That's the Jonathan Crowley book?
That is correct.
Ah.
If you look very carefully at that, the name of the critter he's fighting in that, the last name of the critter he's fighting in that, was at one time Corin, C-O-R-I-N, before he changed his name. That's Chris Corin's father.
So now I have to go and spend. What you're telling me is I have to go spend more money.
Well, yeah, of course. That's what I do.
Is that your?
Nice to send me a reminder. I'll send you a copy of it on PDF.
So is it? And then you have this other. Was it the Overtree series?
Under the Overtree, yeah.
And Serenity Falls are
all part of the chronicles of. Names are leaving my head. How horrible. Jonathan Crowley.
Yeah. So basically, what you're telling me is that all your series are linked together, and that we need. Yeah. Thanks. I appreciate that.
No, Pete loves that stuff. Pete loves linking everything together.
Yeah. And
What
I love
about Terry Hill book stories?
I'll also point out that there's another book that I've done that's Lovecraftian that was done with Charles R. Rutledge, and that is called Blind Shadows.
Okay.
Which Charles refers to as Rednecks versus the Outer Dark.
Okay.
It's a private investigator and a sheriff down in Georgia who run across several victims who have been sacrificed and then must deal with everything that comes from that.
Who's that publisher?
The publisher on that one was... Wow, let's find out.
If only
Because
we
I
had
think they sent me a copy.
Arcane Wisdom.
Arcane Wisdom, thank you. Couldn't think of the name.
They actually, the
I
hardcover.
think they sent me. Yeah, go ahead, Matt. Sorry.
I think there's an ebook, but the hardcover edition, Arcane Wisdom's hardcover books are just stunningly beautiful.
Oh yeah, they're gorgeous. I don't think you can get
I think I have that. I just
secondary
haven't
market at this
had a
point.
chance to read it yet. Yeah.
I'm pretty sure you can get them on trade paperback on Amazon. Not 100% sure, but pretty sure.
You can get it on Kindle.
There you go.
Paperback, it's $17.
Oh, it's an Amazon big old trade paperback.
Currently, Kindle Unlimited, it's $0.
What's that?
That's a great program. Kindle Unlimited.
Oh yeah. I'm very fond of it actually.
Yeah, me too. A lot of reading material. I'm gonna jump in with a quick question, Pete.
Go ahead.
I had mentioned in the video test to you, James, the other day, that Pete said, as he said a few minutes ago, that those books are secretly Lovecraftian, and you said you're a huge fan of Lovecraft. Did you start reading Lovecraft as a teenager, as many people did, or maybe talk about that for a bit?
I kind of came around him in a roundabout way because I got into Stephen King and started reading all of his short stories, and a lot of his short stories were very, very heavily influenced by Lovecraft.
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah.
And then he also mentioned Lovecraft in Danse Macabre, which I thought was an amazing book of nonfiction. It's like sitting down with Stephen King and having a conversation for 400 pages. And I took notes on that puppy, and one of the notes that came up again and again was Lovecraft, at which point I hunted down and read everything by him I could. And he's a hard read for a lot of people because he kind of dances to his own rhythm. So if you don't understand what that rhythm is, reading him doesn't make much sense. If you do, on the other hand, it's great stuff.
And Shadow over Innsmouth is your favorite?
Absolutely. Despite the entire rambling, drunken phonetically impossible section that's done in the middle of that story. I love it.
Heck, I named my kid Zadok.
Hey,
I'll bet you did.
My wife changed it.
yeah, it's
Almost
absolutely.
Yeah, Isabel was great with that, wasn't she?
She was fine with it. I've almost covered. Actually, could you tell us about the Cherry Hill book? That was, I thought, a really good book.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I thought about doing a story with Crowley. Throughout the stories with Jonathan Crowley, I've hinted at the fact that he's incredibly old. I've shown that in a few of the stories where it's set in the Wild West. And I had him show up pretty much out of the blue with Under the Overtree, where he had been around for a while, but only a few people had run across him. So I thought about it and decided to write Cherry Hill. And Cherry Hill is the story where, once again, you're dealing with ghosts. It's a haunted asylum, and one of the people in there happens to be an amnesiac who happens to be Jonathan Crowley. It's how he gets his memories back and what he does after that make the story interesting for me. That and Dead God, which I thought was an interesting twist on the ghost story.
So, what are you working on now? Besides all the other
just
things you told us
finished.
about.
I just had the 4th book in the Seven Forges Sword and Sorcery series come out, and I'm writing a book right now called The Last Sacrifice, which is the first book in a series called, tentatively, Tides of War.
Mm-hmm.
And The Last Sacrifice revolves around a character who, okay, I'm sure we've all read the stories or seen the movies where the group of savages goes out, grabs somebody to take as a sacrifice to their gods. Lovecraft did it, Howard did it, on and on and on. And I got stuck one day thinking, what if the story actually had a problem? What if, when the gods weren't satisfied, they got pissed? So that's what this story is about. The gods are not the people are not sacrificed property to the gods, and the person that causes this to happen has to deal with the consequences of literally starting Armageddon. The catch for everybody involved is that the last sacrifices that were made were his entire family, and he's taking it personally.
Yeah, you see what happens when you don't do a job right?
I'm writing it.
Wow, that's a great idea.
Thank you.
That's a great idea. So that's the first book. How many books do you expect to see in this?
It's slated for 3 books, and after that, I'm going back to the world of Philaine, where the Seven Forges books took place, and I'll be writing a couple more of those. I'm also doing other stuff with other people at the same time. I've got short stories going. I've got a novella that I'm doing a final edit on right now for Sideshow Toys, based on The Court of the Dead, and if you haven't looked at that stuff, you should, because it's gorgeous. And I also have works that I'm doing with Charles Rutledge as a co-author and with Christopher Golden as a co-author.
Right.
Just turned in, after 10 years delay, Bloodstained Wonderland, which is the sequel to our novella Bloodstained Oz.
Right.
And after that, we're going to be working on Bloodstained Neverland probably sometime within the next year.
Oh.
And that'll be the third and final book in that series.
Now, could I just interject for a second? So, but you don't write full-time, right? You have a day job.
Well, I do have a day job, but I also write full-time. I have 2 full-time jobs.
Oh,
I
you
love
young
having a roof
people.
over my head. I love being able to buy the occasional toy for myself. And I'm really fond of insurance. I like all the benefits from having a full-time job.
So what do you do in the more mundane world?
I work at Starbucks as a barista. And
Every once in a while, my venti white mocha is not sweet. No.
tell me once you extra pump, it's fine. Or tell them to stir it properly. That's often a problem.
Now, I have seen you mention that occasionally on Facebook, and I always wonder, and wanted to ask, ever draw any inspiration from that job, the people you meet, or situations that happen, anything like that?
I've said
I mean,
more
you see a lot of people.
in retail is I got to kill a lot of people who piss me off.
That's
They'll never
great.
know I'm killing them, but I know who I'm thinking of when that sword's going through their heads.
Yeah. What's your name, sir? Your last name too? Okay, thank you. Make sure that coffee's done right.
I did a story
And
called
look
Smile
for
No
yourself in
More.
my upcoming book.
I did a novel
Actually,
called
Mike,
Smile No More where I killed off a mother, a child, and a father, all of whom were regular customers at Starbucks I was working at the time. You'd never know who they were because I changed them enough, but I knew who I was killing.
Jim, since all your work is connected, does your sword and sorcery link to your real world horror?
Well, for those who are observant enough, they will notice that one of the wizards in the Seven Forges series is named Corin, C-O-R-I-N, just like Chris Corin and his father. Whether or not they're directly related, who can say? But they're definitely there.
you'll figure it out someday.
Exactly.
There'll be a book.
Family of wizards that crossed over between dimensions or something.
Oh.
This ain't no Harry
But
Potter.
people love that stuff, whether it's comics or movies, or they love Easter eggs. I don't know if you'd term that an Easter egg exactly, but this is related to this. This is related to that. It's cool to catch those things.
I love that kind of stuff. I love the fact that when you're reading Stephen King's Tommyknockers, there's mention of a clown in the sewers in one of the towns where one of the characters goes past.
11/22/63. The protagonist visits Derry.
Exactly my point.
Yeah.
I love
Yeah.
that kind of stuff. I always have and
Yeah.
I always will because I'm a long-time comic book geek. How can you not enjoy this?
Yeah. I do want to talk to you about comics in a bit too, but can I ask? Can I interject and ask who are some of your favorite contemporary authors? Who do you really enjoy reading? Some of your favorite books?
Wow, that's a tough one because there are a lot to choose from. I think Tim
Yeah.
Levitt is brilliant. I think that his last book that I read, The Silence, was amazing. It's up for a couple of awards, and as far as I'm concerned, it should win them. I think Joe Hill is pretty darn good. Stephen King remains a favorite. Christopher Golden is absolutely one of my favorite authors, in addition to being one of my best friends. And the two are not necessarily related. I've read a couple of his books where I went, eh, but for the most part, his stories are amazing. I really, really love Tin Men, because it's a nice science fiction thriller you wouldn't expect from him, and it was well done. And people should go out and buy that book. Not enough people have yet. I read every genre that I can, so that's one of those questions that makes it a little bit more challenging for me. I love Carl Edward Wagner's writing. I wish he were still around to do more of it. I love Charles Grant.
Oh,
One of
yeah.
the best quiet horror authors in the world.
Yeah, we did a show on him like a month or two ago. I love his stuff.
Again, when it comes to atmosphere, this is just not any better.
No.
Seriously, look at Dialing the Wind. What a lovely thing. Look at The Pet. What a brilliant story that was. Tom Piccarelli was great.
Yeah, Dialing the Wind is an excellent example of that, isn't it? Dialing the Wind is an excellent example of that atmosphere.
Exactly. I love that kind of stuff. I eat it like candy. I think that I'm far more interested in that kind of work than I am in hack and slash. Because hack and slash isn't going to do anything to chill me. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've been at this long enough that I've read all the tricks, and very few things will affect me as well as a good-written, well-written piece of atmospheric work.
When
Ramsey
you were
Campbell,
writing
I
for
think, is
comics.
very underrated to a lot of people, and I think he's incredible.
Okay.
Who? I'm sorry?
Paul Wilson, by the way. If you haven't read his Repairman
Paul
Jack,
Wilson. Oh, God, yeah. Yeah, we had him on the show, 2 years ago, guys? And, yeah, those Repairman Jack, that series, there's some definite Lovecraftian cosmic horror themes in there.
But in general, they're just great stories. If you would take all the Lovecraftian stuff out, I would still enjoy those stories wholeheartedly.
Yeah.
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 What a great character.
Yeah, he really is.
When you were writing for comics, what were you writing?
I wrote one story for Clyde Barker's Hellraiser called A Place Where There Is Peace. I wrote one 8-page story for Iron Man called Return of the Demon, which to my knowledge has never seen print, but it was just a little story about him being tempted by alcohol. It's nothing but him coming back from an adventure and 8 pages of him contemplating whether or not it's worth taking a drink.
Okay.
I wrote a story called The One That Got Away for Clive Barker's Nightbreed. I wrote a story for Ecto Kid, and I was quite literally about to take over as the regular writer on both Ecto Kid and Nightbreed when both titles got canceled. I'd actually written issues for them and got kill fees for them because they weren't going to be putting them out.
I loved Ecto Kid.
Yeah.
It was fun. It really was. And I was really looking forward to doing some work on that.
Your piece, A Place Where There Is Peace, was that related to then the story by the same name that you wrote?
One more time for me?
Your piece that was called A Place Where There Is Peace, was that for Hellraiser or Nightbreed, you said?
No, A Place Where There Is Peace was actually the short story I did that started my entire Innsmouth fascination.
Okay.
Right, that's what I thought you had said earlier, and then I thought you named that as a title for one of the comic pieces you did also.
That was my mistake. The actual title of the Hellraiser piece was Of Love, Cats, and Curiosity.
Okay.
Which is about a little old lady who realizes that her neighbor is torturing cats to death and might have taken one of hers and therefore feels obligated to call in the Cenobites to take care of the problem for her.
Oh, yes, because that's an appropriate response.
Well, it is when you're a little old lady and pissed off about it.
Hey, I love cats. I'm all for that, you know.
The lament configuration
Take her
as
out.
a 911 call.
Exactly.
So, you wrote the novelization of the Buffy role-playing game.
I did.
Or, video game.
Oh, you did? Wow.
How did? Because I know Mike's a big fan of Buffy. How did that come about?
Well, Chris Golden and Tom Stagoski were the guys who were writing the game, and they were asked for a novelization and did not have the time for it. And at that particular time, my wife was ill, and I was broke, and Chris knew it, so he said, listen, I'm going to put you in contact with the editor, and we'll see what we can do. And the editor said, what I need you to do is take this 40-page outline for the game and make it into an 8-page outline for a novel. So I did. I sat down that day, I read the entire 40 pages, and I wrote it out as an 8-page outline, and I sent it back to her that night. And her response to Chris Golden was, I kind of figured it'd take him about a month.
Oh,
Not
wow.
a day. I can't always write gigantic amounts every day, depending on my schedule, but I'm faster than the average writer on the average day. At my height, I've done 11,700 words in one day in an 8-hour shift. Which is a lot of words.
Yeah.
That's pretty impressive.
I had a headache and
So-
couldn't write for 3 weeks afterwards, but I can do it when I have to.
So then, are you a big Buffy fan
Love Buffy.
like Chris is, or?
I
Okay.
watched every single episode. I read most of the books. I was absolutely positively addicted to that show. I think Joss Whedon is definitely underrated in most people's eyes. I think he's a much better writer than most writers working in Hollywood. And while many people condemned the Avengers 2, I thought it was awesome.
Yeah. What was that, Pete?
Aliens 3 was the bomb.
You know, in an episode of
What do you
Angel,
mean by the bomb?
Pete, in an episode, I don't know if you know this, but I feel like Pete or Rick right now coming up with some obscure reference. In an episode of season 3, episode of Angel, Joss Whedon actually makes fun of himself for Aliens 3, because Fred's mom says that her dad liked all the Aliens movies except for the third one. He fell asleep during that one. So.
I respect that. I'll also point out, by the way, that the group of mercenaries in the Aliens 3 movie pretty much mirrored very heavily the group from Firefly.
Yeah.
That was his first test run on doing Firefly characters.
Yeah, I can see that.
I just feel the need to toss out that this is
Isn't it
Aliens
Aliens
4, you guys.
4? I think you got the movie wrong. It's Aliens 4 that we're talking about.
Yes, but I wasn't.
Oh, you might be. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah,
You're
Bree's
right.
the lousy one in the
Yeah.
prison.
Of course, Rick is right.
Yeah.
Yes, I'm wrong. Rick is right.
No. Kelly, what were you saying?
Well, I was
Thanks, Rick.
actually saying at the same time that you were discussing Aliens
Oh.
4. Aliens 3 was the David Fincher film.
Okay. Well, Rick beat you to it.
Yeah.
So, before we leave the Buffy thing, so are you a fan of the spinoff too, Jim?
Absolutely.
Angel?
I thought Angel was great. I love both of those shows. If they were still around, I'd still be watching them. Unless, of course, the quality sank completely, which I don't think it would have.
Wait, is there a Buffy DVD set on that top shelf back there? No. My eyes are-
No, but I do have the full Buffy DVD. And the entire Angel DVD set.
Hell. I do too, but hell, you don't need them these days. They're on Netflix, Amazon Prime, and Hulu. Both of them.
And yet I can't always watch those when I'm on my exercise bike. So I
No.
watch the DVDs.
Right.
Because I'm too lazy to wire everything the way I should.
So we talked about a lot of stuff, and we talked about what you're working on in the future. And you mentioned some of the stuff that you're going to be working on in the future, Lovecraftian wise, and it'll be coming out soon. What is the reason you keep coming back to that well? I mean, is it just because of your fascination with Lovecraft, or what?
It's just a great playground to play in. You know, I've always referred to working in other people's stuff as working in their sandbox. He's got an awful lot of cool toys in his sandbox.
He does.
You know.
Yeah.
I also do it because Lovecraft encouraged it. Lovecraft was the exception to the rule. He said, please, feel free to pick up my toys and play with them.
Yeah.
No hesitation on this part.
Yeah.
I'm absolutely for that. I think it's a lovely concept. Also, hopefully I can write something that will make up for some of the really, really bad fan fiction that's out there.
I'm sorry.
I'm glad you feel that way because I'm writing a piece of erotica set in Golden Cove.
Well,
which reminds me, you got to hold up your creature from the Black Lagoon on air,
absolutely.
so the viewers can see that.
This
That's
is the
great.
bank that's available of the creature from the Black Lagoon. I've said more than once that the creature is definitely a deep one, as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah.
And I absolutely love that movie and all the sequels to it. And I'm dubious as to what Hollywood's going to do when they finally get around to making the remake, which is inevitable.
Yes.
Yeah.
On the other hand, if it involves Scarlett Johansson in a bikini, I'm all for it.
They're remaking Xena Warrior Princess, and I'm upset about it.
I am
upset?
because they should be using the original actresses.
Yeah.
It's not
I mean,
Xena
sorry,
Warrior
it's good
Princess.
enough for guys, it's good enough for girls. I don't care if they're a little bit older.
Sure.
I just was saying, I have a theory that Penny Dreadful will somehow incorporate the creature from the Black Lagoon.
I wouldn't be surprised, and I eat that show like candy every week.
Yeah.
Because they just dropped the monster. They just dropped the monster's name last week. They've been getting around the Wolfman, and I said after this, all they have left is the creature of the Black Lagoon.
Well, now while Dr. Jekyll has shown up, Mr. Hyde has not.
But if you saw the I think it was last week's, there was something about an expedition to a tomb, and they dropped the name, which is historical in the public domain, but has definitely a horror movie connection.
I would love to see some of the stuff that's been toyed with for years actually come around. I would love to see Del Toro do The Mountains of Madness.
Yeah.
And by the way, I have to ask this question because I ask this question to everybody. What, in your opinion, is the most Lovecraftian movie that's been made so far?
The Thing.
Do you mean pastiche, like from an adaptation from his stories, or do you mean with Lovecraftian themes?
In general.
Okay.
Interpret as you will.
John Carpenter.
At the Mouth of Madness?
No, The
In
Thing.
the Mouth of Madness. Yeah, I'd agree with you, Jim, on In the Mouth of Madness.
I think absolutely that's the most Lovecraftian story that's been done to date.
Yeah.
I think it's awesome.
I think In the Mouth of Madness is really, really good, I've been really impressed with Banshee Chapter.
Oh yeah.
Don't know that I've seen that one.
It is a 70s riff.
I think it's on
well,
Netflix.
It's on Netflix.
And what's it called again?
Banshee Chapter.
Banshee Chapter. Obviously.
Banshee.
Yeah. It's a reinterpretation of From Beyond, basically.
Cool.
It's really good. But yeah, mainstream, big budget, in the Mouths of Madness, The Thing, which, The Thing is taken from Campbell's.
Goes there.
Right, Campbell's story. If people who have read My Weird Company know that I've linked Who Goes There with At the Mountains of Madness, so I can't not like that movie.
I can see that. Well, I think John Carpenter's The Thing was amazing.
It's a good movie, and I'm amazed, one, that it bombed in the theaters, but then has been able to come back and be essentially one of the best horror movies in the last 50 years.
A lot of people felt it was too violent at the time, but opinions have changed.
Yeah.
I think The Fog bombed too, and it's considered a big classic now as well. Not that The Fog is Lovecraftian; it's a ghost story.
Actually, The Fog has some very strong Lovecraftian ties.
Yeah.
Define for me then.
I love The Fog.
Well, remember we had this issue about the book version versus the movie, because you said there were some references to some streets named after Lovecraftian characters, but I don't think that's in the movie. It's in the novelization.
Yeah, in the book, when they're she's calling out the names of the streets as the fog moves into the town. All the streets are named after Lovecraftian characters.
That's a hoot.
And
it was Dennis Etchison, I believe, that wrote that. Am I right?
Yes. Yeah. And I think there's some other things that are buried in the movie as well, but I'd have to go back and look at it. It's been a while.
I love that movie. I hate the remake.
Yeah, no, the remake.
Oh,
first of all, the remake was
totally
pointless.
agree.
The remake was absolutely pointless.
Well, it has some pretty special effects in a couple of scenes, but beyond that, there's nothing there. Nothing.
In many ways, it also reminded me of was it the Vince Vaughn remake of Psycho?
Yeah.
Which was
point.
Done shot for shot. So, what's the point besides vanity?
Yeah.
Right.
I'm not sure what we got out of having a new version of that.
The original Fog, the John Carpenter 1980 Fog, I remember watching it for the first time, and that Edgar Allan Poe quote comes up, and that piano music, which is just very atmospheric music, and I thought, man, I'm going to love this movie, and I did.
I love that Carpenter offers his own music for his own movies.
Yeah, he does. But to answer your question, I agree with all the movies these guys are listing, and I would throw in there a couple of newer ones, The New Daughter and Absentia. We've talked about Absentia a lot on this show. Have you seen either of those, Jim?
Write that down.
The New Daughter is surprisingly good for a Costner movie, and
but based on a story by John Connolly.
See, there you go. That helps.
Yes, and that's why. Forget the name of that collection. Well, you guys will probably remember the John Connolly collection. But there's several Lovecraftian stories in that collection.
Well, I will say this before you move on to Absentia. One of the things that Costner is really good at is playing the emotionally unavailable male. And, the role in The New Daughter is tailor-made for him. There's no emotional range there whatsoever. So.
It could have been played by Keanu Reeves.
Yeah. Sure.
Keanu can actually pull off a little range now and then. I was talking with somebody yesterday about Oh, hell, once again, the name is escaping me. The movie he did, the Southern Gothic movie he did, where he basically played an angry redneck. The Gift.
Oh, and
Yeah.
yeah.
And you know what? He was
That's
brilliant.
great.
Angry redneck. He got that down perfectly. Which, for a California surfer dude, not bad.
Yeah.
Well,
By the way, another great ghost story.
definitely. Yeah, and definitely check out Absentia as well. Now, I mean, neither The New Daughter nor Absentia are adaptations, but they're just got a lot. They have a lot of Lovecraftian themes. I guess is
I
the best
respect
way
that.
to put it.
The thing is, Lovecraft really did experiment a lot in a field that was small, but had its roots further back than him. He just did it better than a lot of people, and he had really good PR after he passed.
Yeah.
He had a lot of people pushing very hard so that people would remember him properly. One of the things I always love is when people bring up the fact that he was racist. Yes, he was. He was also terrified of his own shadow and wouldn't eat seafood. All of these things probably correlated into his writing. But they weren't the entire root and all of the person.
Yeah.
Well, there's no excuse for the racism, but I no matter what age we're living in, but you're definitely right. It fed into his writing.
Well, but let me throw one defense on that one. No, there really isn't an excuse for overt racism, but he wasn't overt about it. The only reason people know about it for the most part, aside from one poem he wrote in college, is because they had access to all of the notes and letters that he wrote to other people after he passed, which is where he normally made any mention of anything along those lines. To do otherwise would have been rude in his eyes.
Yeah.
Yeah, hell of a lot of letters.
Yeah.
Absentia is done by let's see, Michael Flanagan, which if you've seen Oculus or Hush, that's the same director.
I did not know that. Now I definitely have to see that, because I've seen Hush and I've seen Oculus, and I thought they were both just great. These are movies with virtually no budget, and who cares, because they're just well-directed and well-written.
Right. Well, Absentia is the same way. It is, and once again, the budget precludes having the monster appear on film for any extended period of time, which, in this case, is always a benefit.
I think most cases, not seeing the monster too much is a benefit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
CGI is lovely for things like a good, proper fantasy movie. I don't necessarily want it in my horror movies. Does that make sense?
No, my son and
Absolutely.
my son and I were driving back from someplace the other night, and he asked me, "Dad, if they made Call of Cthulhu, how would you want to see Cthulhu in that movie?" And I thought about it, and I said, "Remember when we watched Cloverfield? We never could figure out what the monster really looked like. You never could put it together because you never got to see the whole thing. That's what I want to see. You see bits of it, and you know that it's bigger and more horrible than the bits you're seeing." And that's a good answer.
Yeah. I agree.
Yeah.
Where I'd like to see things.
Which, by the way, I always like to point this out to people. One of my favorite Lovecraft movies is Ghostbusters.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because all of the stuff that's going on in the city, as the ghosts are starting to come around, is almost directly taken from Call of Cthulhu. Crazy people are getting crazier. Walls are bleeding, the whole 9 yards. All of that stuff was set up beautifully in Ghostbusters, and most of it came directly out of Call of Cthulhu, the story.
Yeah.
Cats and dogs living together. Mass hysteria.
Back to talking about showing the monster, I think the only way to improve on In the Mouth of Madness would be to cut the scene where we actually see the creatures coming towards them after the book is ripped open and Sam Neill and the woman, I can't remember her name, are looking into the abyss, and all of a sudden we see the creatures coming towards them, and the creatures are kind of bad puppet effects, but if they had cut those effects out and we just saw the reaction of Sam Neill and the actress, they were such good actors that they were selling the scene completely. We didn't need to see what they were seeing.
I liked seeing the rubber monsters in that because you only saw them for a second. You just got them long enough to get a hint of what they were.
Oh, it was a second too long.
Look at it on videotape and pause, or on DVD and pause, and look at them carefully. You realize they're sad puppets.
Yeah.
You know what I found interesting? We were all just at the H.P. Lovecraft Film Festival, and they did a showing of The Mist, based on the Stephen King story, the movie. They showed it in black and white.
Yeah.
And when I saw The Mist originally, I thought the monsters were all kind of fakey looking. They really looked rubbery and plastic. But in black and white, it took that element out, and they really looked scary.
See, and Darabont wanted it to show in theaters in black and white, but they wouldn't let him. They said, yeah, I've got to do it in color, and he basically said, okay, but I really want an option of this on the DVD in black and white. And I saw it in the theaters in color, and I saw it at home in black and white, and I thought in black and white it was much better. This is one of those situations where maybe they should have let the director have his way. Sadly, that rarely happens once you get to editing.
Yeah.
Well, it's just a way to maybe salvage when you don't have the big special effects budget.
True. I also love the fact that when King wrote that story, he said what he wanted to do was have a giant rubber monster fest. So it worked well.
How long have you been writing, Jim?
Since 1991. Good while.
Is that when your? I guess a better question would be when was your first story published?
That was when my first story was sold. I don't think it was published for another year after that. I had sold the 8-page, or I think it was 8-page story for Clive Barker's Hellraiser, and then I had to wait 18 months for it to come out because they had gone from being a monthly to a quarterly magazine between the time I sold it and the time it came out in print.
Wow.
You know, just to switch gears real quick for a second, would you have any advice for? I know a lot of beginning and not beginning writers listen to this show on the podcast and watch live too, I'm sure. But you've been doing this for over 20 years, yet, as you say, you love having insurance and things like food and things like that. So you work at Starbucks full time. Yeah, like you mentioned before, there's this perception of, you know, you become a writer, you get a book published, and it's pretty easy going from there. Yeah. Yeah. What advice do you think you could offer writers?
Write. Sit down and write every day. I don't care if you feel like it. I don't care if you've got the spare time. If you want to be a writer and be a professional, write. Plant your butt in the seat and write for at least an hour a day. If you can't make that much time, you're not trying hard enough. Okay? That's the first one. My second advice is read voraciously, whenever possible. Devour books. I don't care what genre. You shouldn't bother with the genre. Find writers you enjoy outside the genre and read them. Read who they suggest too. Because if you're limiting yourself to one field, you're limiting yourself to perception. What a miserable concept, only being able to see one thing. I like seeing everything.
Right.
Don't quit your day job unless you're absolutely sure you can make it without the day job. I could probably successfully carry on right now without having the job at Starbucks. But you know what? I like having the extra comfort. I also like not being a hermit. And that's a big thing for me. I could easily sit at home and write for 12 hours a day and never do anything else, but I would probably never leave the house. What a horrible existence. I'd rather be out and breathing and meeting people. My friend Charles, again, writes with me on several novels, and we've done 2 novels together and several short stories. Also works a full-time job and does most of his writing before he gets to work in the morning. He'll write for an hour and a half before he goes to work, and that's his writing for the day.
Yeah.
But like me, he's also fast. It helps.
What's your, I don't want to put this, what's your why? Why do you write? What is it that appealed to you about writing in the first place, and why do you continue to do it?
I absolutely love the process of telling stories. Initially, I wanted to be a comic book artist, and I spent a lot of time drawing, and I ran across an editor named Marcus McLaurin at Marvel Comics, and I showed him my work, and he said, you know, your anatomy is horrible, and I can tell that you used a ruler, but you still can't get a straight line going. but you're telling a great story with your pictures, and maybe you should try your luck with writing instead. Turns out writing is more the palette that I can work with. I love telling stories. I love comic books. If I could get a gig as a comic book writer, I'd do it right now. And I'd continue writing novels, and I'd probably still work at Starbucks. Put a few less hours every week.
Right.
If you could write any character playground you could that you haven't been able to yet, what would you write?
Wow, that's a tough one. I'd get a real kick out of writing Swamp Thing, or doing Man Thing and doing something with them other than having them be a transport plane for characters at Marvel right now. I'd love to do any of the comic books that they had going in the 70s when it comes to horror for Marvel Comics. Morbius, The Zombie, Dracula, Tomb of Dracula, all these things were amazing to me. Son of Satan, Ghost Rider, the whole 9 yards.
I recently, revisited Man Wolf.
Loved it.
Yeah.
I loved Werewolf by Night.
Son.
I always wanted to do a Werewolf by Night / Man Wolf crossover. I thought that would be awesome.
Yeah.
Think about the sheer carnage you could cause with that. I've got a full proposal for a comic book at Marvel Comics based on Scott Edelman's character, the Scarecrow, who became the Straw Man in Doctor Strange. Maybe someday I'll do something with it. I've got a couple of other proposals I've got sitting around that I wrote a long time ago, and I have publishers interested in me doing a graphic novel interpretation of The Wild Hunt, which is my werewolf story.
Okay.
Well,
Okay. Also, Batman would be awesome, let's be fair.
Yeah, well,
Batman.
Oh, yeah. Because he's Batman.
Yeah.
Well, that's a great segue into comics. I would love to know what you think of Rebirth and why we had to get there.
Well,
DC Comics Rebirth that they're doing right now.
That DC Comics is now getting my money again.
Mm-hmm.
Which was not happening during the New 52. Because I read the first few issues of the New 52 and said, well, we're done now. Superman's a whiny boy.
Yeah.
And acting exactly the same way that Batman. And Batman is Batman because he's Batman. Superman should not be. I did every single character in the New 52, or at least the vast majority of them, were angry and pissed off and hated life. And that's not what I want out of a comic book. I want a swashbuckling adventure with superheroes. You know?
Plus, there's no contrast to Batman when everyone is trying to
exactly
be so full of angst, you know?
Well, Superman and Batman in the comic books have had their crossovers over the years, and they've even been interpreted as really good friends on the other sides of the spectrum on most things. Superman doesn't have to hide in the shadows. Superman doesn't have to use fear as a guideline, because he's got all those powers. Batman, on the other hand, is hiding in the shadows and scaring the crap out of the bad guys with as much superstition as he can manage. That's why he dresses like a bat.
Right.
You know? They shouldn't be the same character. And I read the Rebirth title. I have a wonderful friend of mine named Cliff Biggers who runs Dr. No's Comics down in Georgia. And gets all of this stuff in advance and said, you need to read this. And I did. $2.99 for 80 pages. You're not going wrong on my book, number one. And number two, damn, it's a good story. I love it. Dear Marvel, please remember how to hire artists, by the way. Because DC's kicking their butts in that department.
I like the direction they're going with Rebirth. I don't know that, it's the right way to say this, that they're taking enough responsibility for it. It's sort of this attitude of, well, this just sort of happened, and by the way, it was Dr. Manhattan's fault,
I think that's a nice twist, actually. I love the fact that they're looking at the world and going, something's been going on and we're not sure what it was. You and I now know that it's Dr. Manhattan. It wasn't that big a leap. And they kind of leaked that before they should have. But I thought that was a great way of doing this. It's all been a universe because he went off the end of the Watchmen and said, yes, I do like people. Maybe I'll create something. And he did. In one form
a lot of people are not happy that that Watchmen are being introduced into the DC universe. I'm not one of those people. To me, it's about telling a good story.
Exactly.
And but don't get me wrong. I'm very hopeful about Rebirth, but the Doctor Manhattan shown in Rebirth doesn't really seem to be. He's more the Doctor Manhattan, the attitude of Doctor Manhattan at the beginning of Watchmen, not at the end. Does that make sense?
But we haven't
He
seen
had kind of an attitude
to actually
adjustment.
know that. Does that make sense? He's had maybe 3
No, what do you
months
mean?
so far in anything that I've seen, unless you run across something that I missed. Ozymandias.
Well, they're
Ozymandias.
painting them as a bad guy, is what I'm saying.
I don't know that they are. I think that they're showing him that way because they haven't really told us enough yet to know what's going on or why he's done it.
Yeah.
There could be a
that's the
bigger
point.
story going on in this, and I have a lot of optimism towards Jeff Johns. Okay, he just took over on the Hollywood side, and I think he's going to end up having a lot more control on the comic book side as a result of that. Because they literally moved the entire DC offices to Hollywood to make sure that they could balance this out properly. I don't think that Jeff Johns was responsible for a lot of the more negative aspects of the New 52. I think other parties are responsible. I couldn't guarantee that, but I can only go by what I've heard secondhand.
There's probably plenty of blame to go around, be my guess.
Well, they tried something new and it failed. My mistake, I think their mistake was not realizing that 6 months in. Instead of going, we made a horrible mistake, they just kept going. And hopefully they turn around. But my perfect example of that is Man of Steel. What a great movie, as long as you ignore the fact that it's supposed to be about Superman. It's the story of an alien with an S on his chest who happens to land in Kansas, but beyond that, it has nothing in common with Superman.
Yeah.
Seriously.
No.
Let's look at that first scene where he let Dad die in the tornado. No. Dad says, no, let me die. What Clark Kent should have said was, no, Dad, not this time. Instead, he let his father die in a tornado. Bullshit. That's not Superman. General Zod slaps his mom across the face and knocks her 5 feet, and his response is to punch Zod through Smallville, causing multiple explosions and God only knows how many deaths. That's not Superman. There's a fight in Metropolis. Let's just keep fighting here. That's not Superman. And that seems to be, to me, the entire problem with the entire New 52. That's not those characters. Every one of them was made a dark reflection of themselves for reasons I don't understand, with the exception of the Creeper, who was turned into an Oni with fangs. Didn't work for me.
Yeah, that was, Mike and I shared a little reconfiguration of the Justice League with Mike a few weeks ago.
Yeah, I liked it.
And I had the Creeper taking Batman's spot because it just makes it goes back to that whole concept of fear and superstition that put Batman into that position. And the Creeper can pull that off, but not that Creeper, the old Creeper.
Right.
The one that was
Creeper was still a detective and still actually did stuff.
Right.
This one ran around with tusks.
The Creeper that thought like Batman and acted like the Joker.
Yeah. He's fun.
Yeah.
I, by the way, love
You're
that
right.
he showed up in the Justice League for a little while back in the 80s.
Yeah.
I thought that was some great stuff that was written by Giffen and illustrated by, I can't remember who off the top, Kevin McGuire, I think.
Yeah.
One of my favorite lines, from Black Canary to the Creeper. What are you doing up there? The Creeper's response, the Watusi. Black Canary's response was, stay right there, I'm coming up to kick your ass. I thought it was brilliant.
Yeah.
But you're right about the New 52. It was kind of mystifying to me because it had such a negative response just right out of the gate. And DC's response was, no, this is great, for 5 years.
Again, I appreciate the experiment, but stop now.
Right.
Yeah.
If I wrote a series of books and every one of those books was getting more and more negative reviews, my publisher would have canceled me long before I'd have a chance to cancel myself. But if I got nothing but negative reviews, I might look at it and think there was something wrong. And by negative reviews, I don't mean on Amazon. Everybody gets negative reviews on Amazon. Well, okay, and
Classics
Bucky
get
too.
negative reviews.
What's that?
The classics, great books get negative reviews on Amazon.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, all right. You guys have any other questions for Jim before we let him go?
I'm burned out.
I have that effect on a lot of people.
Well, Jim, thanks for being on the show. Really appreciate having you on
Guys.
and talking with us. Again, well, Pete, you got those books in front of you if you want to hold those up. But if you've not read Deeper, I do highly recommend it. Really fun book. If you love Shadow over Innsmouth, I think you're going to like this. And then what are you holding up there, Pete?
Possessions, Rabid Growth, and Newbies. And don't overlook Newbies. Newbies is really good.
Thanks very much for having me, guys.
And last, but you said, I want to make sure I have this right. You said you're writing a sequel to Deeper. Is that correct?
Yes.
Do I have that right?
I don't have a due date on it yet. I am
Okay.
working on it a little bit at a time, and that will be called From a Lower Deep.
You have a publisher?
What's that?
You have a publisher?
I have a couple that are interested.
Okay.
No solid answer yet. Depends on
If you had-
what.
If you had to guess, what would you say? What, a couple of years or so?
Probably about 1.5 to 2 years, yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you, Jim. Thanks for taking the time. Really enjoyed talking with you.
Truly my pleasure, guys. Thanks very much.
Thanks.
Bye, Jim.
Nice guy.
That was nice.
My
Yeah.
book, Golden Showers at Golden Cove, will be a nice tribute.
Oh, this is
Say
a
who,
family
what now?
show.
I didn't say anything.
I don't know if I'm old
Pete's
enough to
over that.
understand that.
By the way, I have
Okay.
a prize for the listeners.
Oh, yeah, right. Prizes. What do you got?
This is called The Cthulhu Wars. It is by Ken Hite and Kenan Bauman. It is from
Not to be confused with the game.
it's Osprey Publishing. It is basically background supplement for a role-playing game, but you can read it to enjoy it for its own sake. It doesn't have any stats or anything or characters. It's just like a history of the secret wars in the U.S. And for example, they talk about the raid on Kerwin's farm. It's a very well-made little book. It's got lots and lots of nice illustrations.
Good. Thanks. The Cthulhu Wars by Kenneth Hite.
Yep.
So, for anyone listening now through the 19th, you can get in on that prize. I'll tell you how in a little bit. The Sea of Ash, which I published a 1.5 to 2 years ago, Sea of Ash by Scott Thomas, will be starting tomorrow morning, I believe it is. For a week, will be the Kindle edition will be $1.99 for a week. So that's a good deal, and I'm doing that because to draw attention to the fact that the audio book will be out soon. I don't know how soon, probably a couple of weeks at tops. So now that I've got 95 to 98% of the mailings for Autumn Cthulhu behind me, I think I'm going to mail the last thing tomorrow. Now I can move ahead with the next project. It's already done. It's read by Lehman Kessler from Ask Lovecraft. He did a wonderful job. Scott loved it too. And I just have to finish putting it together, get it on Audible. Wrote some intro music for it, kind of a mood setter. So it should be nice. If you love the Sea of Ash, I think you'll enjoy listening to it. So hopefully it'll bring in some more new readers because that's a wonderful book. So $1.99 starting tomorrow. then what else we got?
We want to go into Doc
Kelly.
Savage since Matt raised that.
Yeah,
You can talk about Doc Savage.
you know, of course, the 1975, I guess, movie was really played for laughs and was more a parody than anything else. Although I liked it. They're now going to remake it, and you all know who Doc Savage is going to be?
Yeah, Dwayne Johnson.
The Rock.
Well, he does look I mean, he's got the right complexion, and he's got the right build.
He is the man of bronze, for sure.
I just hope they don't make it silly. I mean, we already had a silly Doc Savage movie.
Well, it depends.
Yeah.
Here's what I have mixed feelings on what I've heard so far, but I'm going to give it the benefit of the doubt for now. Shane Black, from what I saw in Iron Man 3, when he had the scenes where Tony Stark wasn't wearing the Iron Man armor, that was pure Doc Savage when he was inventing all these little little bombs and gas pellets and whatever. That scene all played like a Doc Savage movie. What Johnson has said, now Johnson can be a better actor than we give him credit for. Johnson has said there's going to be a comedic element in that the way Doc Savage was raised, he can't relate to people. Now, Doc Savage, just to give a little background briefly, was a guy whose father, his mother died at an early age. His father put him in the hands of scientists to train him to be the perfect man. He's a little like the Arnold Schwarzenegger character in Twins.
Okay, I might be misunderstanding. I thought his father started teaching him medicine at age 3.
He got put. His father put him in the hands of a group of scientists. So it was also all sorts of experts. So he's like trained to be the perfect human being. He's like the greatest chemist, the greatest biologist, the greatest surgeon that ever lived.
One of the inspirations for Superman, I believe.
Yes, well, he was known as the Man of Bronze rather than the Man of Steel. He does have a Fortress of Solitude based in the Arctic. He's a little more like he has some Batman attributes. And that originally it was a vest, but it became he had something equivalent to a utility belt in a couple of stories. There's all these little gadgets in his belt, and he just throws. He generally uses anesthetic bombs, knockout gas is his main weapon.
Can I tell you my darkest Doc Savage confession? When I was collecting these books, the reprints, when I was like 9, 10, 11, I thought Kenneth Robeson was a real person.
Well, so did I. We all saw it turned out to be a guy named Lester Dent.
But anybody could have been Kenneth Robeson.
Well, there were multiple writers, but it was primarily Lester Dent. It was a house name.
I felt betrayed.
Well, nobody learned those things until the biography. Well, Pope fans knew about it if you're reading obscure fanzines, but it didn't really become public knowledge till a book called Doc Savage's Apocalyptic Life, a biography of Doc Savage by Philip A. Farmer, was published. When I read that, I said, "Oh, this guy was named Dent, who wrote these." I thought Kenneth Robeson was a real person or a real author. Now, if you were like Will Murray, who writes Cthulhu Mythos stories, among his other activities, you would have known by reading the novels that they couldn't all be written by the same person because there were all these little subtle contradictions. So there had to be multiple Kenneth Robesons, but it was primarily Lester Dent. But the angle of the movie is supposedly, at least from what Dwayne Johnson said, he has trouble relating to other people. Now, in the books, he has trouble relating to women. He was raised without any female contact, so that's going to make sense. But
the only woman in the whole series practically is his cousin, Pat Savage.
Yeah.
Who has silver hair. And I guess my favorite thing was when, what was the name of the lawyer? There was
Ham.
Was it Ham?
Ham Brooks.
Ham and Monk was the chemist, right?
Yeah.
Okay. They gave her a box and told her to take it away to a mountaintop and guard it with her life. And after about 2 weeks, she opened it up, and it was a picture of a goat. She was mad at them for that.
Yeah. Actually, that was Monk alone who did that.
Oh, okay.
And her hair is bronze, not silver. This
Oh,
is
okay.
what happens when you get somebody who's an expert on the character on the show. But
Yes.
But the problem I have, he shouldn't have any problem relating to men. If you put him in a room with a Lex Luthor type businessman and they had to negotiate a business deal, there's no way Luthor is fooling Doc Savage. So I have a little problem if they make him naive in his dealings with men. Women, that is perfectly in line with the character. He does not understand women for beans.
Well, I'm looking forward to this. I've got a huge man crush on The Rock. I'll watch him in anything. I don't care how stupid it is. He's always the best part of everything he's in.
Well, you know
Really?
what?
The Tooth Fairy?
Did you watch Escape from Witch Mountain?
I missed that, but I did
was
see
good.
Escape from Witch Mountain or whatever that one was, and that was awful. He was still the best part of it.
Hey, I'm enjoying the show Ballers.
There you go.
What?
Well, the other thing is, just from a personal note, I sort of have a vested interest in this. I want it to be a successful movie, even if they take some liberties. Because the more people become interested in Doc Savage, then more people are going to read my book on Doc Savage.
Sure.
That's true.
So I want this to be an incredible success. You know, and as Pete can tell you, if we look at all the great detective series from the 1940s, like Charlie Chan, they take huge liberties from the books.
Oh, yeah.
Well, I think you can take it for granted that they'll take liberties. Most movies do.
Well, and some things
So,
just won't make any sense anymore.
Yeah.
But I want him in. His headquarters is in the Empire State Building. I want that. I want to have him at least have Monk and Ham in the movie. He has 5 assistants in all, but that might be a little too. 6 if you count his cousin. That might be a little too much for one film. So at least want Monk and Ham because they're the most interesting.
You know, it worked for Buckaroo Banzai.
Who was very heavily influenced by Doc Savage.
Yes. But they had an all-star cast of multiple characters in there, and they pulled it off.
Right. But it's going to be, I mean, I think if they develop any of them really, it'll be Monk and Ham. It'll be hard to give the other assistants a lot of character development in the first film. The other thing we should note is that Will Murray's has been writing new books on the character. He's going to come out with a Pat Savage series starting very soon. And King Kong and Doc Savage exist in the same fictional universe as licensed, because we've already had a Doc Savage novel called Skull Island, and Will Murray's now going to write a King Kong versus Tarzan novel. So officially, Tarzan and Doc Savage will be in the same literary universe, as opposed to all the tricks that Philip was a farmer used to pull to make them in the same universe under aliases.
Well, I said I would talk a little bit about promoting books and so forth, and that could fill up 6 hours, I suppose. But one thing that I've noticed is, well, here's an example. I noticed someone deleted their author page on Facebook the other day, and the reason given was that Facebook is just making it too hard for the author to promote. Nobody's seeing the posts, and Facebook wants money to see more of the posts and so forth. I'm really paraphrasing here, but that was the gist of it. And so they're just going to use their personal Facebook page. And I thought, but there's ways to make those pages work. I mean, I'm making the Lovecraft Easing page work. The whoever that guy is that runs Strange Eons is making the Strange Eons page work. Is that you, Kelly?
I've never heard of it.
Never heard of it? Okay, well, maybe he needs to do a better job. Um, and there was a book I read almost 20 years ago called Who Moved My Cheese, and you don't really need to go out and buy the book unless you're a glutton for punishment, because I can summarize it for you. It's a good book but I just don't know that you need to read the whole book to understand what the book is saying. Did you read this book, Pete?
Oh yeah, I was forced to read this book.
You were forced, yeah, at work probably, right before they fired you or moved you or demoted you or something, right?
Yeah.
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 Well, it's basically about these rats that live in this maze, and they're used to getting their cheese in this one area, I guess. And you have to forgive me; it's been almost 20 years since I read the book.
Nip and Scurry.
Yeah, I thought it was him and Haw, something like that.
Okay. Yeah.
Anyway, so they're used to getting their cheese in this one area, and one day they go and the cheese is not there. So the gist of it is that one of them bitches and moans and has a victim mentality about it, and the other one, instead of complaining, he basically says, "Well, this sucks. I better go find out where the cheese is now." And I've never forgotten this because it's really, especially if you're self-employed and if you're a writer, you are running your own business. It's good to remember. I remember when trying to relate all this to marketing and promotion. I remember when I was a real estate agent. I was a real estate agent for a decade and a half. I started in 1995, and that was right about the time the internet was that whole internet thing. If you guys have heard of it, was getting big. And I just remember vividly the older real estate agents being just pissed as hell about the internet, because these guys were these gatekeepers, and the only way you could buy a house or get any information about a house for sale was to call the real estate company, talk to the real estate agents. They loved that. And so the internet comes along, all of a sudden, houses are listed online, and people can go and get the information without calling the real estate agent. And the old guard really, 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 really hated that. And a lot of them just bitched and moaned, and I just thought, well, so make a really good website where people are I can get clients that way, which is what I did. So, I don't know. I see a lot of complaining about Facebook, Amazon, and I will grant you that a lot of this complaining is perfectly justified. I mean, it's not fair that Amazon did this, or it's not fair that Facebook did that. Well, you're probably right. Probably isn't fair, but Facebook doesn't care. Amazon doesn't care. So, what can you do to, how did somebody put it on one website I was reading? If you want to compete, work with the market's evolution, not against. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
I mean, to my mind, I heard the complaints about the internet when it came to books.
right.
And dealers who were running rare or used or specialty bookshops and would put out a catalog once a month, and you would get the catalog in the mail, and it would be a mad dash to get through the catalog and then call up the company and see if they still had the book.
I remember that.
Yeah.
Because it was out-of-date information, because it was print and it was mailed.
Yeah. So, like, the people who, if the bookstore was in Chicago and you're in Miami, the people in Philadelphia got that catalog a whole day before you did. So if you saw anything for sale, you went and got it as fast as possible. And you paid pretty much whatever price was being offered because you didn't know. There was no basis for comparison. You know,
Yeah.
you trusted the retailer to say, this big book is worth $100. You're going to pay $100.
Also,
Yeah, go ahead.
before we got nearly everything that's in the public domain on the internet, I would go crazy with book catalogs like collecting Alan Quatermain from H. Rider Haggard,
Right.
obscure Sax Roma titles. Now, all this is virtually on the internet.
Yep.
Yeah.
So
Pete, what you're saying is that the booksellers didn't like it.
The booksellers didn't like it at all, but mostly because it undermined them.
Right.
And then as time went on, a lot of the other shops didn't like it either because when Amazon came along and moved from books to other things, it undermined a lot of their business. But the reality is that Amazon to me, Amazon was a giant catalog that was up to date as possible, as
Right.
opposed to the Sears catalog or the whatever catalog that you got in the mail, and hope that maybe you could order something from it.
Now, I think a good thing for aspiring writers to look at, I posted it on the eZine webpage. Charlie Strauss has an extensive listing of blog posts about the publishing industry and how it's changed and how things really work, the inner workings of it. I've read them before. They're really fascinating reading. So if you kind of want to understand where the publishing industry is and what's happened, that's a good thing to look at.
Yeah.
It is a very good thing to look at. But more than anything, I'd like to get across, if I can, that you got to have this attitude of being willing to change, and that sounds like a very, very easy thing to say. But if your cheese used to be over here and suddenly it's not there, if one day selling widgets worked at this place, well, the booksellers that you're talking about, Pete, if one day the catalog works and then a year later nobody's looking at your catalog, you have essentially two choices as that bookseller. You can say, God damn it, that is unfair as hell, and be pissed about it and do nothing about it. Or you can say, all right, now what works today? I better get on that bandwagon.
Right.
And I think that's what a lot of people miss. Amazon is not your friend, but I don't think really Amazon as a writer or a small press publisher, but neither is it your enemy.
Right.
It doesn't care about you at all. What it does care about is making money.
Yeah.
So if you can align, yeah, go ahead.
The other thing I wanted to talk about, while we're on the subject, is the sudden collapse of regionalism, particularly in collectibles. So, for example, before the internet, if you had Carl Hyacin is a huge author because he's from here. So if you had a first edition of his first book, you might ask a couple $100 for it because everybody in Florida wants that book. I had the opportunity. I went to Seattle, and there are several used bookstores in the Pike's Place market. I found Hyacin's first edition on the shelf for $20 because there's no demand for it. So suddenly, with the internet, the guy in Seattle can sell books to Florida.
Right.
And there's no regionalism anymore. What makes a book expensive in a little area is no longer important. So if there's a glut of the book nationwide or in a small area, it can be shifted around very quickly.
And I don't know, maybe you guys have seen, thanks Matt, see you next week.
Yeah.
maybe you guys have seen a lot of these articles. I haven't seen. I don't make a point to go look for them, but I've certainly seen a lot of them, and it boils down to this: Amazon is screwing small press publishers, and I'm not sure I understand the thought process behind that, and maybe I'm missing something. I'm perfectly willing to say that I am, but Pete, do you understand that? In what way is Amazon screwing small press
I'm
publishers? Because
not
there's
sure
a lot
what
of small press publishers doing well.
I'm not sure what the current outrage is, so I've not been able to figure it out.
I don't know that there's anything particularly current. There was something a couple of years ago, but I read an article, recent article about Amazon bullying, and I wrote down a quote from that. The small press publishers, talking about the small press publishers who have no choice but to deal with Amazon. And
Well, you always have a choice.
yeah, wait a minute. You don't have to deal with Amazon. No one's making you list your book on Amazon. Yeah, Kelly?
What would they have done before Amazon?
Right.
Right.
Well, they just
Right.
had.
Well, yeah.
Well, they had online. Like, I'll use an example though of somebody who refuses to deal with Amazon. There's a very specially publisher named Battered Silicon Press
Right.
by George Vanderberg. Does all these collections like you can get a 3-volume collection of the complete Jules de Grandin by C. Berry Quinn for like $300, something along those lines. He used to deal with Amazon. They demanded too much in discounts or whatever, so you have to go to his website to get his stuff.
Right. And he's made that choice, and that's perfectly fine. That's his prerogative. I don't understand this idea that you have to deal with Amazon if you're a small press publisher or if you're a writer who self-publishes, let's say. I think it's very advantageous to deal with Amazon, but you certainly don't have to. Were you going to say something, Kelly?
I was going to just agree with you. I mean, we sell the magazine through our website and then through local comic shops and then through conventions. We don't sell through Amazon. It's a choice. It probably would sell a lot more if we went through Amazon. We have made the choice not to. The same reason or not the same reason, but the same way we have made the choice to not go digital with the magazine. That's nobody's fault or decision but ours.
Right.
Right, and that decision one isn't right and the other isn't wrong. You know, it's a personal choice. Rick, sorry.
You know, as I say, the only problem I had was Amazon. When they were having all these problems with small press publishers, they would list the book on their site. You would order the book. It would take forever, and eventually they would cancel your order. And sometimes, I mean, the book was available directly from the publisher. Sometimes after they go, well, you know, oh, I got to order it directly from the publisher. It's now out of print.
Right.
Yeah.
If they're going to offer it on the site, then ship it.
Right.
Or cancel it right away. Tell us, you know, that was my one complaint about Amazon. You don't have
and again, let me stress that, you know, okay, so Kelly, Strange Eons, they made the decision not to deal with Amazon. Lovecraft Easing, we made the decision to deal with Amazon. I'm not right and Kelly's wrong. Kelly's not right and I'm wrong. It's a choice. And, you know, okay, Amazon's too big. I hear these complaints too. Facebook's too big. Things may happen and you may have every right to complain about them. You may not even be wrong. But at the end of the day, you have to ask yourself, what can I do to be successful? Complaining is usually not going to get you there.
Yeah.
So.
Well, you know, here's the thing. You know, you could say Amazon's too big, and Facebook is too big. If Facebook was, if I had to do more than just Facebook, I can't handle Facebook and Twitter. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Really? You want me to run 4 or 5 different media services?
Right.
I'm not that witty. I'm not that smart. And the more time I have to do that, the less time I have to do what you really want me to do. And the same thing goes with Amazon. Okay, I got a little cash influx the other day. I'm looking to buy books. All right. I go to Amazon, I make the list, and then I go to every publisher. And I said, well, what's the best deal you've got? And, I'm online, I'm listing all the books. And, the pricing is the same. I can even live with the little bit of extra I have to pay for shipping directly from the publishers. But when it came down to it, I don't want to have to place like 12 different orders.
Exactly.
And track them.
And if you're selling anything, it doesn't matter if it's a book, if it's a widget, it doesn't matter what it is. It's about the consumer. They're going to do 9 times out of 10 what's easiest for them. And so your mind as the seller has to be working along those lines, fair or not, if you want to be successful. I don't know what fair means anyway. Life isn't fair. So Amazon's not fair. Facebook isn't fair.
Life's not fair. It's not fair that I have to go to work every day to pay my bills, right?
It's not fair that I was not born Kelly Young.
We all gotta deal with the world. Deal with reality on reality's terms. If this is what the world is, then you got to figure out how to make it work for you.
I think that's my point more than anything. Go ahead, Rick. I'm sorry.
Yeah, has Amazon gotten rid of free shipping? Because I heard that.
No.
No.
You have to order a heck of a lot.
You mean Prime?
No, I think.
Well, if you're a Prime member,
for Prime, you get free shipping. But the old, you used to get it like if you ordered $35. I think that's
for 45.
I think it's still 30.
I don't know. I think it depends on the product.
But no, you're right, Rick. I think the price point for free shipping went up a little bit. That's the nature of the beast. Everything goes up a little bit.
And here's another example. I see on Facebook, before I come on the show, I see this thing on Facebook, something about if you sync your smartphone with your Facebook photos, then you need to download a new app that Facebook has called Moments. Not if you upload from your phone, not if or your computer, but just if they sync together. Then on July 7th, Facebook's going to delete those photos unless you do Moments. And the bitching and complaining going on is unreal, and I'm thinking, guys, this is a free service. I mean, a little perspective. You're getting all this stuff for free. What are you complaining about exactly? If I can do if I can be really successful as a small publisher, selling my books on Amazon and other places, that's where I'm going to go. Here's what I'm trying to say. This is if the customers are going to ABC website to look for books, I want my books there. Okay? If the majority of them are going to that site to look for books, that is where I want my books. Today that happens to be Amazon. Okay, let's say 25 years from now, it's some hologram that you punch out. You got this little unit, and it's a holograph, and you punch it, and you're looking for books, and that's where everybody goes. Well, you can be damn sure that's where my books are going to be, because that's where the customers are.
Yeah, this is not the end result. We are not seeing Kindle, and that's going to be where everything ends. It's, probably in 25 years we'll be plugging a jack into the back of our skulls and just downloading movies and books and everything that way. And if you're not willing to grow with the technology, then you will be left behind. This is evolution at its basis.
Yeah. The funny thing is, I read this article today about when the novel first appeared.
Yes.
And the people that were picking up the books and reading them and reading and reading and reading, and the people at the time were afraid that the novels were giving their readers brain fever.
Okay.
Because they became addicted to reading. And
That's horrible.
Yeah.
Well, what's interesting was all this, how it changes book collecting and everything. There were kind of windows where everything's going great, and then the window closes. When I first discovered online book services like A-Books, Bibliofine, whatever. See, when I used, Pete was talking about lists before, and the thing you wanted to do if you were a book collector is rather than deal with all these guys in catalog, you wanted to find some place like San Francisco, I think was excellent in this regard, or maybe it was San Diego. There was some place which had tons of bookstores I went to once.
Right.
Or pals, for that matter. And you go to a bookstore, you're going to find, in those days, you were going to find something that's listed on a catalog for $100 for $20.
Right.
The guy's doesn't have catalogs. He wants people to pick them off the shelf, so he's selling them for reasonable prices.
Yeah.
So you do wonderful in that regard. Then online book services start. And when they started, you get them all posting these. When I was first looking for books, I would see wide divergencies in prices.
Right.
Same thing, $20 here, $100 here, same edition of the book, same condition, whatever.
Yeah.
And I was making all these great deals. Eventually, the dealers caught up with one another.
Right.
They started to price them all the same.
But you know what happened
after that? A lot faster these days.
Yeah.
But Rick, you know what happened after that? A lot of the dealers went out of business.
Yeah.
And I saw South Florida went from having about 20 bookstores to having less than 10.
Mm-hmm.
Now, next weekend, I'm going to go to a town in the middle of nowhere where the book dealer sells books by weight.
Yeah.
You fill up a paper garbage bag with books, he puts it on the scale, and he tells you how much it is. I love that bookstore.
Yeah. It sounds like such a simple thing to say and such an easy, cliched thing to say that when things change, when the market changes, when things change, you have to change with them if you want to be successful. It's a hell of a lot harder to do, but it's really important. And I want to stress again, look, maybe you have every right to complain when things change. I'll tell you, I was a very successful real estate agent. I cared about my clients. I loved what I was doing, and I made some really good money. Then you know what happened? I got sick, and it really sucked because I couldn't be a real estate agent anymore. So, did I have every right to complain? Sure. Yeah, I had every right to complain. In pain every day, I can't make money anymore. I can't do what I like doing anymore. But I had to decide that complaining is not going to change a thing. That my cheese was no longer in real estate. Let's put it that way. So I had to find where it was now.
Right.
So Yeah, Kelly, you're laughing your ass off, but it's a good analogy.
It is. I want to know if the rats were in the walls of the Delacour estate, or
Or in the maid who's Algernon.
You know, Mike, one of the things you're talking about is, I'm going to use two terms here: path lock
hmm
and disruption economy.
hmm
And path lock is when you invest heavily in one technology and it works for you, you will stick with that technology even after something better comes along
Right.
because you're locked
Most
in.
people, yeah.
Yeah, you've invested heavily in it and you don't want to change. Now, I know there are still people I know collect VHS tapes because they invested heavily in VCRs, and God damn it, they're going to keep that thing running until it burns out.
Yeah, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. However, if you're a video store and you're trying to rent VHS tapes these days, complaining that people don't want VHS
Is
or
not going
even
to help.
DVD anymore is not going to do a damn bit of good.
Right.
You
And
know, digital came along, and now my video store, nobody comes to it anymore.
right,
Okay, that fucking sucks. What are you going to do
and that
about it?
what you just touched on is disruption economics. So Blockbuster had this idea, and it started with the VHS tapes, right? We will build an empire based on VHS tapes. Oh, and then DVDs came out. So you know what? We're going to transfer our business to DVDs. And they did. They phased out VHS and went to DVDs. And then
Right.
Blu-ray came along, and they started phasing out the Blu-rays. What they never predicted was that another way of delivering movies would come along and disrupt their business completely. And they were
But
so
yeah.
far behind on the eight ball, they could not recover.
But I'll tell you who did a great job is I've been with Netflix for over 15 years, and like many people, I started with Netflix getting DVDs in the mail.
Yep.
And you know what? When Netflix was ahead of the curve when it came to digital,
Yep.
they saw it coming and they said, if you're a member of Netflix, you can watch movies digitally too through our service.
Right.
You know,
Right.
what would have happened to Netflix if they would have said, no, we deliver DVDs, man. That's what we do.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
They wouldn't be a household name like they are now.
No.
You know, they'd be phasing out like Blockbuster.
Yeah. It's amazing. In a very, very short time, Netflix made itself a utility.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It is as much a utility as television or your electric or your water. People will not go without it.
maybe more than that. I have internet and I have Netflix, but I did not bother to get cable television.
Yeah.
Right.
The only reason I have cable is because it bundles with my internet service. And it's like, if I drop cable, it saves me $5 a month. That's a cup of coffee, I just...
Now, I'll tell you, I have getting close to 250,000 followers, and many of those followers, let's say 90% of them, come from Facebook. So
Right.
what happens someday if Facebook isn't as popular as it is now? You think that can't happen? It happened with MySpace. It
Of course,
happened with AOL.
it will happen.
You
It
know?
will...
Yeah. And the thing that you can't be afraid to change. If that happens, then I'm basically going to go, okay, well, where can I reach people today? Okay, they're no longer there. Where do I need to go now? You know, you can't be afraid to do that. And it doesn't matter if you're a writer, if you're small press, if you're self-publishing, if you're selling cars, you're selling real estate, it doesn't matter. So,
Yeah, who would ever thought of shopping the internet for cars?
right.
But I do it all the time.
Yeah.
Well, and that's good because you no longer steal them.
Yeah.
Portland, Pete. I gotta hear this story in Portland.
Yeah, it'll come in Portland. Yeah. I gotta find a hotel. So.
Well, I
So
think
anyway,
just
yeah, go ahead, Rick. Sorry.
one last thought. Technology is going to do you in some way, no matter what. I knew a fellow who's now deceased. His name was Mike Avalone. He was a successful writer of paperbacks. Not a great best-selling author, but he was prolific. He was making a very comfortable income. He was doing things like Hawaii 5-0 novelizations, Man from Uncle novelizations, novelized movies like Krakatoa, East of Java, whatever. The reason he was mainly successful is he was an incredibly accurate typist. Could type fast, could type accurately, got those manuscripts out on time.
Mm-hmm.
Word processors and PCs come along. Lost his advantage.
Right. And as much as he may have had a right to complain about it, it wouldn't have changed a thing.
Right.
So I guess, yeah, that's my point more than anything. If you want to be successful, small press, self-publishing, this is something you really have to bear in mind. And a lot of things I don't know, but this is something that I do know, you know. So I studied promotion for half my life. So anyway, Matt had a book to give away, The Cthulhu Wars by Kenneth Haidt. If you'd like to be in the running for that, send an email to lovecraftezineprizes@gmail.com, lovecraftezineprizes@gmail.com, and please put the title of the book, The Cthulhu Wars, in the subject of the email, and I'll choose somebody randomly a week from now. So, we have anything else to talk about before we sign off, guys?
No, I think we're good.
Seemed like somebody had. No, I mentioned Sea of Ash. Oh, I know what I wanted to say. I wanted to shout out to Hale before we sign off, because he's really doing a great job with interviews at the Lovecraft Ezine blog. So, thanks, Aesop. Great job. Really appreciate you. And I know what the other thing was. I just put on the website, I'll link to it on Facebook and so forth, the print and Kindle editions of issue 37, Lovecraft Ezine issue 37, are now available. So you can go to Amazon to buy those if you want. So, you know, Barnes & Noble they had every opportunity to create another platform of ebook, but they dropped the ball. You know, they didn't have to be as big as Amazon, but they could have.
Did they drop the ball, or did people just? I mean, was it the VHS versus Betamax? Because it seems to me that Amazon had successfully pushed out their competition in the brick and mortar stores, and now I'm hearing that Amazon wants to start their own brick and mortar stores.
Well, I guess it's all in how you look at it. Could they, if they really wanted to, have created why do people not buy Nook ebooks as much as Kindle? Because they prefer Amazon. Nobody's making anybody do anything. Nobody's making the consumers do anything. You know,
Well,
Amazon made it more palatable.
Well, the other thing is so I went to Barnes & Noble last week and we bought something. And I was asked again, do I have a Barnes & Noble card? I'm like, no, I used to. So, well, we could renew it. And it's like, no, thank you. I'm like, why? It's like, because you never followed through on anything you promised. I never got gift certificates in the mail. I never got any points. You promised me an umbrella. I never got the umbrella. It was a bad relationship.
This is what's known as dropping the ball.
Right. So, Amazon may be shitty and not give you anything, but that's what you signed up for. Yeah.
Our new slogan. We may be shitty, but you signed up for us, by God.
No, but
They didn't overpromise.
if you go to a strip club and you pay your $20 and you get a lap dance, that's what you paid for.
Interesting analogy.
Don't expect
Always comes back to strip clubs with Pete.
wait, what? You don't expect that same level of service from your waitress at some bar. There's
Yeah.
when you go into any relationship, there are going to be good ones and bad ones. Some of them are business relationships, some of them are friend relationships, but you have a certain expectation. If that expectation is that, I'm going to get shitty service but I'm going to get what I paid for, that's fine. You'll be perfectly happy. But if you expect a whole bunch of bonuses and you get nothing, well, that's not what I signed up for.
Yeah, well, let me say, speaking from personal experience as a consumer with Amazon, I think I'm echoing in you, Pete. There we go. I don't think they've ever dropped the ball with me. Logan saved up, my son saved up for over a year to build a computer, so we could build a computer together for him for last Christmas. Really expensive graphics card ordered from Amazon came in the mail. I mean, really expensive, man. And it was faulty. Boy, did that make me nervous, because I was really worried about my son. I didn't want to disappoint him. And now we gotta save up again. I called Amazon, and they sent me. I told them what happened right away on the phone. They said, "We're sending you a replacement $500 graphics card." And I said, "I don't have to send the old one back first?" And they're like, "No, you have a certain amount of time that you have to send it back in, but we're getting this in the mail to you right away." That's just one example. So, yeah, I don't know if I'd call it. I don't know if I'd call them shitty at all from a consumer standpoint. So, but anyway, we could talk about this forever. But let's see, who do we got next week? Nobody. No guess next week. And I'm not sure. Isn't next week Father's Day? I think it is.
Next weekend is Father's Day, yes.
Yeah, so I'm not sure if I'm allowed to do a show next week or not. I'll let you guys know later on in the week. But then on June 26th, we have author Mercedes Yardley. So that's 2 weeks from now. So anyway.
Maybe we should rename Father's Day Yog Sothoth Day. Since he is a father.
My brother-in-law calls it. Huh?
Or Father Day.
My brother-in-law calls it Emperor's Day. My brother-in-law calls it Emperor's Day, Father's Day. I don't know. All right, thanks for listening, everybody, and we'll maybe see you next week, for sure in 2 weeks.